Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to Jesse Phil and for suggesting I be a part of this. And it's been a really fun time thinking about what I would say about about creating media and community building. Went so much into what I am, so I don't think I need to talk about myself. But I did bring some pictures that I wanted to show about the community that I'm participating in building, that is actually building me as well. A lot of pictures you're going to see up here were made by the community for the community. A lot of the people here are self-empowering, they're working together, and the media they create is in no small part a way of, I guess, magnifying our voices. I mean, I think when I think about media in my mind is the definition is, taking an idea and thought and broadcasting it over space to a large amount of people at the same time. And in many ways, a lot of underserved community didn't have access to that technology, whether it was the printing press, whether it was the Bible, whether it was radio, television, newspapers. Well, these pictures in no small way demonstrate how media in the digital age is levying that playing field, whether it's blogs, whether it's the web, whether it's cable access, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Vimeo. More and more people that look like me, that come from my circumstance, that come from my background, that share my stories and share my narrative, are telling our stories in ways that have eluded our forebears and our forefathers. This is a really great friend of mine. Her name is Natalie Figueroa. She runs a place called YGB Portland, Young, Gifted, and Brown, or Black. And she has been organizing parties and events where people come together. This is a mural by a gentleman named Alex Chu. He and his wife and their daughter, who's all of like 3 years old, are active media makers every day, whether it's animation, whether it's video, or murals. Alex actually documented the process when he made this mural, because he did it over on 82nd and I want to say Halsey, and he was shocked at how many white people accosted him on a daily basis about the content of this mural, because this mural reflects his community. It's diverse, it's multi-generational, it's multi-abled, and this is the community that we're hoping to create with our media. This is Alex and his family. I got permission from him, and this is the Mazzy Show. They do a cooking show with their child, and they are fully ensconced in Facebook, Instagram. They are living their lives not just privately, but very publicly. And that's something that media means for a lot of us these days. We're living very, very public lives. This is a photographer by name of Tojo. He does a lot of contra photography, and he has a focus on artists of color. You're not going to see his work in the Oregonian, but you will see it in the Mercury, you see it in the Willamette Week. This is a young woman named Amienta Abioto. She does loop, and she's a bit of a DJ, and this is the scope of his work, is making sure that her voice, what she's trying to do, is being magnified and broadcast to all four corners. More work by Tojo. This is a young trans band called Kids Table, and they played a concert for us. So I think we might be coming into the Friends of Noise section of the slideshow. This is one of our workshops where we do professional development for youth in not so much creating media, but being behind the scenes in making the media. So our young people, they produce the shows, they book the shows, they make posters, they make ads. It's not just enough for them to make the beats, but how are we teaching them how to actually get those beats out there in the real world? This is from last year's PDX Pop Now, which is a very popular all ages concert. But I found out when we started Friends of Noise that they didn't actually have young artists playing this all ages show. They're all adult artists. So a lot of our work centers on young people. And there's one thing that I want to show in particular, if I can find it. But I didn't think I passed it, so I'm going to back out of this. This is a poster that a young person made for our upcoming workshop series. I did a residency, not residency, but I did a collaborative project with a Grant High School class in digital media production, and the class treated us like a client, Friends of Noise as a client. And they created a variety of images and small elements for the web and for social media. But this young woman, Chloe, was such a standout that we reached out to the teacher and the parents and said, hey, can we hire this young woman who's just a sophomore in high school to become our digital media director? And the parents said yes. So now we are offering opportunity to work with us continuously throughout the year. And we're actually hoping that that becomes a real pursuit for her and a real path forward for interacting with Portland Public Schools. That's about it for me. I guess, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be able to have this conversation with André. And hopefully this format, we did this with one of the earlier speakers. I'll ask André some questions and he'll present. I would like hopefully all of you, while we talk, to think of some questions you can ask as well that we can hold some time for. We first were introduced, I host a summer program. We bring college students some from Reed, some from around the country, teach them media production skills, journalism skills, artist skills. And we worked with what was then Portland Community Media, is now Open Signal. The students kept coming back and just saying like, André. And I was like, who's this André guy I keep hearing about? You really had an impact on a lot of my students. You really were inspirational to them. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And the feeling was mutual. It's funny, I'm still friends on the social medias with several of them, and especially Katrina.
Oh,
yeah, so she did some stuff with August was a mentor project. Happy to recommend them. So that's also a big part of community building. It's not just about the building, but it's about maintaining community and finding connections and just keeping things moving.
I want to start our talk here with what seems like maybe some easy words I'm just going to throw out to you, and I want you to give definitions.
Okay.
Inclusion.
Oh boy. Inclusion.
It's been part of your job title.
Right, yeah.
And not to say that that should make it any easier, because it's probably a working definition.
It is, but I think at the end of the day, inclusion, for me, really means being open and seeing where one's blind spots are and doing the work in seeing those blind spots and seeing into those dark corners and making sure that other people are not invisible because we didn't take the work to see them.
Diversity.
Diversity, for me, really means being actively working to expand my experience and my knowledge through the shared experience and knowledge of other people. If there's someone's experience is I'm not learning from it, or I'm not experiencing it through them, through their life, then I'm often more part for it.
And you're doing this through helping with production skills, or you're doing it with also how you consume media, or all the above?
Well, as an individual, it's definitely all of the above. But I think with the young people that I've worked with, whether it's at Open Signal or through Friends of Noise, I remember at a time where I was at my daughter's middle school, and the principal was like, our main job here is how do we expose them to as much as possible so they get to make their most informed choice that they can make about what they want to do with themselves. And I really took that to heart. So with the Friends of Noise kids and with the students that I met through NISC, it was important for me to do whatever I could do within the time frame that we had to expose them to as much as that I might have to share, and whether that meant calling other people in or reaching out or connecting. My big thing is no big eyes, no little U's. And as long as we can see everybody in that passion, everybody can contribute something.
All right, I have three more of these definitions. Journalist.
Wow. That's a new one for me because I would never have considered myself a journalist, except I guess I'm doing it now that I'm an X-ray. But my definition is sharing and highlighting the stories that might not be heard otherwise.
And it's, I mean, the journalist has changed so much in the last 5, 10, 20 years, and it seems like part and parcel of that change has been both diversity and inclusion, and as well as forms of media, which we'll talk about later, because you don't seem to favor necessarily one form of media over another.
I don't. And that might be a product of me growing up in the MTV generation. That might be me being a product of someone who, growing up exposed to multiple religions, Islam, Christianity, exposed to multiple classes, growing up in New York City, Brooklyn, but then going to a college preparatory school that was one of the best in the nation, going from New York out to Portland, and that level of diversity. So for me, code switching has been, a big part of my life from day one as a means of survival. But I think nowadays, considering the many different forms of communities and medias and overlapping, it really does help to be able to navigate multiple spheres and not be overwhelmed in a way. So right now people complain about information overload. And I think that could be a real hindrance if you succumb to that overload.
And do you have wisdom that you use for yourself, or that you provide to students of like how do you condition your diet of media, as it were? When there's access to media in all genres, locations, and how do you cater your own diet?
Well, I think in some degree, I think a core part of our palette regarding diet is our core values, and kind of going through the work of knowing what those values are. And I think once you can figure out what your values are, and they may be malleable, but once you get our core ones, I think that provides a compass or a lodestone to figure out what you're going to gravitate towards and what you're going to kind of put aside. I'm not looking at Stormfront, I'm not looking at a variety of websites or a variety of publications, because that doesn't appeal to me. And I have to be, and I try to share with other people, we can pick what we want to see and what we want to invite into our lives. Who's here has seen the movie Seven? Anybody? Right? Who here has seen Trainspotting? Right? When those two movies came out, I saw Seven, and I was so repulsed and horrified. And I said, why? Why did I see that? I didn't have to see that. I can say things I don't want. I don't have to see everything. I've never seen Trainspotting. It's a great movie, but for some reason, I said, I'm not going to see that. I can be my own filter. I can be my own boss. So I think once we figure out, it's relatively easy to hew to our values once we identify them. And I think it makes it really easy to start filtering and choosing what we want to invite into our lives.
I'm going to keep getting the definitions, but I want to challenge that a little bit, because once we create that sphere of our values, do we start then to edit out some potential other viewpoints that we might be, that might challenge us, or that might expand our own diversity?
Yes and no. Yeah, definitely yes. I think anything taken to an extreme can easily fall into a trap of getting to a feedback loop, and I'm only connecting with people that I know online. There's a gentleman who I met who has the same birthday as me, and we met through a mutual friend. We met on Facebook. I've never met him in real life, but he is extremely to the right of my politics. And, he's always putting up Obama this, or First, Second Amendment that, and I've considered defunding him. I've never met the guy in real life, but I won't, because, and I do comment on occasion. And I might put and we have a respectful discussion. So, I think that, anything take to an extreme, yeah, but I think that if part of our values is being inquisitive, being open, I don't think it's one value that overrules them all, but definitely a collection of values where hopefully they're working in tandem and harmony.
And I think this second to last definition hopefully plays into that bit. You've used the word community a few times. How do you define that?
Oh boy, I would define community as, I would say people that have shared values, shared experiences, and hopefully shared outcomes that are willing and want to work together towards a common goal.
Is it geographic at all?
No, not these days, not in the digital world we live in now, no.
And what role does media or media that you produce, how does that play into defining that community? Or how can it, how should it?
Wow, I mean, I think in many ways, I didn't bring any buttons like I normally do, but just wearing a button, whether it's a Black Lives Matter button or a Friends of Noise button, that is broadcasting a bit of your values out there for people to see. I think that, right now, unfortunately, our society, our country has become more and more polarized because more and more people are willing to subvert their own personal values and fall in line behind the values that they're seeing broadcast at them, or broadcast to them. Maybe that shows a lack of firm value judgment on their own as they're growing up. Maybe that shows a lack of education, a lack of religion, a lack of I don't know what. But I think that media definitely has a role in helping communities form and gel around an idea. I mean, think about how gravity wells, you can have something that attracts people to it or ideas to it, and before you know, that original thought might be lost, but hopefully that original thought is still something that is driving the growth of that community, the growth of that thought process.
Final definition, yourself. Do you define yourself as an artist, as a mentor, as an educator, as an activist? How because you've played so many roles, I mean, in your own life, and certainly here in Portland, working with RAC, which is a major funder of the arts, working as as an educator, community builder with Open Signal, and now working truly in direct services. How do you see yourself or your career?
It's interesting. I've always had a big heart. And I attribute that to my mom. She was a special ed teacher growing up, and I got to. Yeah, she is. That's what she's hiding her face. My mom definitely taught me through actions and through modeling the importance of giving of oneself and being part of a bigger thing and not being selfish to a large degree. And the sacrifice that came with that. And I, was happy to work at community media because I was empowering voices within the community. I was happy to go work at RAC. Wow, this is a big organization. But for me, a day that sticks with me was we were doing a equity, diversity, sensitivity training, and they flew in the sky from Seattle. Maybe took the train, and we did that like that privilege exercise where you list your privileges, or you list people who you think are more privileged, blah, blah, blah. And I was amazed at how much privilege I had. I'm a cis male, heteronormative, I've got a college degree, upper middle class, I'm able-bodied, all these things. And before I walked in that room, I would have said, I'm not privileged because I'm that way. And that was the thing that would have defined my privilege. So when I realized how much privilege I really had, right now, everything I do, I try and do through the lens of how am I giving away privilege? How am I sharing my privilege? So when I'm on the radio, whose voice can I bring in here, and how can I just listen? And how can I share their story, their message? With young people in Friends of Noise, how do I not give them back power, but how do I recognize and help them recognize the power that they already have before it's taken away by adults and say, sorry, you can't do that because you're not old enough. When I worked at RAC, I learned a ton about funding and grants. How do I help people write grants? How do I share that information? So for me, a big part of my everyday life is how do I share the privilege that I've gotten? And the weird thing is, like they say, what can you give away and you always get more of it? They say smiles or love. It's true. I'm living the best life when I started giving stuff away. When I started making connections and I said, oh, I know this developer and I'm going to wait and hold on to my knowledge of him until it can suit me. No, I'm going to connecting with someone and said, hey, someone's looking for a space. I can't use this space right now, but I'm not going to keep this idea in my pocket until it suits me. So that's been a really big part of my practice.
We're gonna get to Friends of Noise eventually. I want to back up a little bit and look at some of your earlier career and development, you were just starting to talk about that.
Mhm.
Did you have mentors when you first started your career?
Wow, not really. I mean, I had life mentors. There was a gentleman named Michael Cappy Grice, who was a very profound and impactful teacher at the Metropolitan Learning Center in Northwest Portland. I didn't go to that school, but I dated a girl who did, and you know, he taught me real life lessons, not career lessons. And I think as a black man growing up in America, you know, a lot of those life lessons definitely can apply to any career. You know, recognizing, you know, reading a room, and, you know, not advocating your power as an individual. You know, so in that regard, when it came to media, when it came to media production, not a lot of mentors, because I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me. You know, I mean, I worked at Wine & Kenny for a while, and, you know, I worked in the AV department, and we were all just grunts, you know, slinging tape and making copies. You know, granted, there was a relatively robust African-American population at Nike, but they were, you know, in a much more creative side in the media side. So I don't mean to throw any shade at them at all. But, you know, when it came to, you know, filmmaking, I went to the film center. I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me at the film center. A lot of women, which is great, and I think that there's definitely, I got to give props to a woman named Laura Ross Paul, who's a local painter, and for a while there, we were quite close, and there was a definite kind of bond between, you know, both being minorities in a white man's world. You know, she felt in many ways that her work was not given the proper due because she was a woman, and I learned about the Guerrilla Girls, I learned about all that. So in that context, if I take it beyond media and look at life, of course I have people that I look up to that provided me a lot of lessons, but I wouldn't have defined it as mentorship then. I probably would now though.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about you're part of the MTV generation, as am I. I mean, when MTV first came on in the first several years, there were no black musicians, which...
You mean on MTV?
On MTV. Right. Thank you for clarifying. Right. There lay the tension.
Right.
And that mainstream, as much as MTV was and became mainstream, was not representing.
Mm-hmm.
Not to jump ahead, do you feel like that has changed? I mean, if you were coming of age and cutting your teeth now, are there some people that you feel like would represent and sort of give you some holder stars to help guide your career more?
That's interesting because there's a gentleman named Kevin Jones who runs the August Wilson Red Door Project. He's a prominent theater director, and when I started at RAC, he pulled me aside and he said, you have to keep their feet to the flame when it comes to diversity and equity, because you've been here before. We're in a cycle. People talked about diversity and equity 30, 40 years ago, and they're going to talk about it 80, 90 years later. And change only happens when we don't back off because we think we made some progress, and then we kind of lay our guard down. I grew up not just in the age of MTV, but the age of Spike Lee. And, you know, in many ways, Spike Lee was, you know, I think still the most renowned African-American director. But there wasn't quite the echo effect of his ascendancy to where then, but now here we are, a generation later, and we've got more black directors across the world that are intersectional, whether they're women, whether they're LGBTQ, whether they're male, whether they come from means or not. Now, people might not see the connection. I think I see the connection. So, you know, and before Spike Lee, you had Peebles, you know, so there are always trailblazers that people who are pushing the envelope, and just because we may not see the direct impact of their pushing in the short term, it's definitely moving the ball down the field in the long term. So, in that context, I think now it's an incredible time to be not just a black person in making media, but, you know, marginalized people across the board, POC, women. I mean, we are willing to have the Me Too discussion. We're willing to have Oscars So Black. We're willing to say, wow, you know, there are fanboys across the world who are grooving off of Black Panther as it is making more money than they ever imagined. And I wonder if those at Marvel said, gosh, why didn't we do Black Panther first? He's making so much money. When it comes to, so to some degree, money is still the final arbiter of access. And while digital tools and technology definitely lower the price of making media, I think there are many ways that we are willing and able to make media outside the system, but at the end of the day, we're still hoping the system calls on us. So while I might create a web series tomorrow about two cats in a bodega, wouldn't that be great? Like a web series about bodega cats. At the end of the day, though, while I'm making it, at the back of my mind, when am I going to get the HBO deal? When am I going to get that Netflix deal? Because in all fairness, those people still control the means of distribution, the real means of production. I think, when you hear about, people say, hey, the real path to independence is controlling the means of production. Will Tyler Perry and Oprah and Ava DuVernay come together and create a black studio? I don't know. One would hope. Will Michael Jordan, I do think the resources are there. Is there, I don't know. So I'm kind of torn on that.
And how much, because you work, I think you have an interest both in mainstream media, but you're also working with smaller productions. Is that apples and pears you're comparing, or is one leading the other?
In a capitalist system that we live in, we are told repeatedly success means growth and getting bigger. Even with Friends of Noise. For the last 2 years, we were relatively comfortable doing what we did. We do 4 or 5 pop-up concerts around town, the kids had a lot of fun, woohoo. But we got to a point where we had to either grow bigger and become self-sustaining and start looking at revenue and start looking at our website and monetizing our website, or we were going to collapse because half my board was like, André, I'm getting married next year, or I'm moving to Arizona, or things are happening. We have to either get bigger or we're going to shrink and get smaller. I think in some ways, smaller, micro-targeted, media definitely has a place. Does anybody here listen to the podcast, The Future of What? It's a great, if you're into music, it's an amazing podcast. Where they talked about subscription model music, where there's a woman named Annie DeFranco, did I get that right? She's earning a good living because she's got about 5,000 fans. That's not a huge number, but they're willing to pay money every month to get access to her early releases, to be connected to her, to be part of their community. And that 5,000 is the minimum. I'm sure it's a lot bigger than that. But she said, I'm not going to go the way of the studio anymore. I'm not going to sign my life away and get a big fat check that is whittled down to the studio time and marketing and blah, blah, blah. If I can connect directly with my audience, directly with my community, and I can create, what I'm giving to the community is music, it's joy, it's life, it's happiness, and they're willing to give me $5, $10, $20 a month, that's a relationship. And that's a very sustainable relationship. So I think that there are ways to start small, stay small, but the message that we're constantly getting from our parents, our government, our society is you gotta swing for the fences, you gotta go for the brass ring, and pay for the things you don't know, the side things that happen with that.
Yeah, and I think that raises another, I don't want to give you another definition,
No,
but
yeah.
it raises an interesting question, is what is success for a media maker? Is success somebody who can pay their own bills, make a decent living, and do that as their livelihood? Or is success $100 million, or 100 million followers, whichever one it is,
Right.
and it has to be the scope of Black Panther or
Right.
Get Out.
Right.
Which way are you looking at success?
Well,
Or is it something different? Is success of being a media maker just the emotional quality? that
it's
gives you?
it's on a spectrum. One could say that. Name a famous painter, a famous French painter Van Gogh. You know, we would all say he's successful because his name has lived on and his paintings lived on. But he was flat broke when he was making those paintings. He was literally living hand to mouth living on the benefits of some rich patron. So yeah, here's a couple of bucks, make me something, and I know that my kids, my great-great-great-grandkids are going to benefit from the work you're doing now. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that success is really measured by us as individuals. Yes, there are some people, there are some artists, like André who said, you know, I don't need to live a popular lifestyle. I don't need to be in the People's Choice Awards. I don't need to be in the, you know, on The Voice. I am happy knowing that I am writing and creating media that is following my truth and speaking to my heart, and that I'm connecting with people that also feel the same way. That's, I mean, I can't imagine anyone saying that that's not successful. And yet there are people like, you know, P. Diddy or, you know, Tommy Lee who are, you know, make tons of money, and there's a, maybe from my perspective, an emptiness. But who am I to say? You know, I mean, unfortunately, I think success is so subjective that it's really hard for us to define it for other people.
Let me change gears a little bit. I want to talk about, because you have worked, you have a radio show, you've worked in Open Signal is both TV and film production. Friends of Noise is music. Let's talk about what you see the virtues for each of those mediums, specifically in terms of right now of inclusion.
Well, I would say the biggest is just accessibility. I mean, right now between podcasting, I mean, obviously, Open Signal started as Portland cable access, you know, close to 30, 40 years ago, because when pay TV like HBO and cable companies came online, your local your local, you know, Channel 12s, 49s, they were kind of frozen up because they didn't have access to this cable box. So the people, through their representatives at city government, said, hey, we're going to charge a license fee to the cable companies so they can create a studio that anybody can go to. And we're not going to edit it, we're not going to censor it, it could be anything. And back then it was anything.
The naked guy.
Right. Whose name shall not be mentioned.
Do people know who the naked guy is? Can I still give that reference?
Yeah.
That he had a show, and he was, because the First Amendment in Oregon is so expansive, he was just naked.
Yep.
And he would vacuum his house.
Yep.
He would clean the pool. He would hang out with friends naked.
Yeah. So taking that lesson or taking that paradigm, I think that there are definitely easier on-ramps for different people to different media. So right now, anybody that's got a cell phone can make a podcast. My daughter has made movies that are now on YouTube with their friends on her cell phone. You know, so those are two on-ramps that are now a little bit easier due to technology. You know, I mean, as much as I love X-Ray, I love KPOO as well, and they've been a community resource for over close to 50 years. You know, obviously the television and the film were definitely behind some really, really powerful paywalls and powerful unions and powerful connections. You know, but now I do think there's something to be said for almost like scaffolding. You know, I might start in radio because I want to learn storytelling. I want to learn just being at ease, opening up and being vulnerable and sharing myself. And where does that go to next? So maybe it does go to Broad City, or maybe it does go to something like Hits in the Hall back in the day. So I think, you know, it also goes back to where are we most comfortable? You know, I like to have a face for radio sometimes, and you know, I'm not thrilled about being on TV, but I'm having a great time doing radio because I get to talk to people, and I get to hear what they have to say, and I get to share it.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. That idea of media having much more of a populist and ease of access. Is there a concern that quality can be at risk?
No, not for me. It isn't. When I first started into filmmaking, I heard that Francis Ford Coppola at one point was thrilled at the idea that everybody would have a Super 8 camera and we would just be inundated by content. And here we are now at peak TV. Some people like watching, you know, zombie killers from Mars. Who am I to say that they shouldn't watch that? Some people love killer clowns from outer space. Some people love, you know, watching a documentary about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, or watching a documentary about Rush. You know, we cannot think that there needs to be a single arbiter of what quality is. And I have to say, that had a direct impact on me recently within the Black community. I was part of an organization called BCC Brown Hall, and we were basically Black, BCC, what was it? Black Creative Collective. And for a while there was an issue of quality. We had some art, granted, Spectrum. Samia Bashir was in it, Keon Gaskin was in it, you know, just a variety of people, and at some point there came this tension with, hey, that person's art isn't up to our snuff, do we put it out there? And I was like, well, how do we not put it out there? How do people get from where they are to where they want to be if they're not given the opportunity? So through Friends of Noise, we let any kid play. And if it's just if they only got one song, they got one song. If they are going to squeak and their voice hasn't cracked yet, we don't care, because we want to create a safe space for them to know, hey, you're going to get a lot of love from us, and we are not going to be the thing that maybe makes you change your mind. And so in the same context, right now, we have barely scratched the surface when it comes to content. I mean, it breaks my heart that there are books and songs and stories from other cultures that I'll never hear, because I don't have the language to understand it. So believe me, I can't imagine that, I think in some degree, not that I'm a big capitalist, but I think the market will provide avenue and access to things that rise for different reasons. You know, I mean, I know a lot of people that did not like Moonlight. I loved it. And they have their reasons. And I know people that didn't like Passion of the Christ. Other people did.
You've talked about Friends of Noise enough. I think we need to say what it is.
That's what I do.
Okay.
So Friends of Noise is a nonprofit that I started with about a dozen other people. Basically, at first it was to address the lack of all-age music spaces in the Portland metro area. There was a very popular spot that closed down back in 2014 called Backspace. It was on the bus malls, easy to get to, but it closed down because of market forces, rents, building codes, a variety of things. So we formed a board, we got a 501c3, we started getting donations, we started applying for grants, and we've grown from putting on like 4 concerts in different, and as an itinerant, and pop-up concerts in different parts of Portland. Now we are renting a space for a monthly show in the Roseway neighborhood on like 73rd and Sandy. We now offer workshops for young people, not how to make music, because there's plenty of people who do that. Rock Rock Camp for Girls, My Voice Music, School of Rock, but we teach how to produce the music. So we teach, you know, how to set up a PA, how to do a sound check, how to do lights, how to book bands, how to make posters, and all that kind of stuff. It's our aspiration that these, you know, black and brown kids of modest means are not still having to go to the powers that be downtown at the Schnitz or at Dante's or at the Roseland in order to get their stuff out there. How do we empower these kids to make music in their own communities? I mean, I grew up watching the Wonder Years, and I remember seeing, you know, a show where the young people formed a rock band and they played in the garage. And I want kids who live in the David Douglas School District, who live in East Portland, to maybe recapture a bit of that analog, real lived experience in the same way.
Well, there seems to be a parallel to that idea of access into the cyber world for anyone, as well as access into the city, music opportunities. How did you get to Friends of Noise from TV, film production? What was the decision to go there, or what was the opportunity, or?
The decision was when I moved out to Portland. Let me backtrack. My first live music experience was seeing a band called Fishbone at a place called the Cat Club in Midtown Manhattan. And that live lived experience, sweating with a bunch of people, had a huge impact on me. I wasn't tough enough or rough enough to go into Manhattan by myself as a teenager, so I didn't. But when I moved out here in my 20s, it was a playground of a variety of music, whether it was Key Largo, whether it was Satyricon, Pine Street, La Luna, X-Ray. So I really dove into live music, and I embraced it. When I worked at RAC in 2014, 2015, I hosted a workshop called The Happening, which I inherited from someone else. It's basically a state of the music industry. So we brought people from labels, venues, musicians, music educators into the room and said, hey, where's the music scene in Portland right now? RAC has, in the past, and I still think currently, has been known as, maybe a little elitist, a little standoffish, and a lot of their support went to, painters, photographers, more European-centered classic arts. And the music industry definitely felt slighted by that. And I said, hey, I've got a lot of connections in the music industry, so really let's make this happening a real thing. So we took over Holocene, and one of the topics that I know that I want to talk about, since I had a place at the table, since I was a decision maker, I said, we're going to talk about all age music. And not to my surprise, there's a really good, people really responded. And because I worked at RAC, because there was a conflict, after that was over, I went back to my desk and I did my job. About a month later, I get a call from a friend saying, hey Andre, you didn't know this, but people are still talking about The Happening and the need for all age spaces. We've been meeting once in a while. We'd like to bring you into the meeting since you kind of got this ball rolling. So once again, no big I's, no little U's. I was just one of, like I said, a dozen people putting in my 2 cents. And really, we did asset mapping. We didn't want to reproduce what other people were doing. We talked about, can we afford a space? It was a really, really beautiful time where building community through a shared goal and a shared purpose really came to being. It was like, it feels weird. It's almost like, you're watching some like old Star Trek and you see like the transporter and like the things kind of like just coalescing to existence. That's what it felt like. Yeah.
I'm going to open it up for some general questions here in a second. Because you have manifested your career in a couple different ways. Share some career advice. How do you know when it's time to leave a job?
Oh boy. I don't know because I've left jobs for a variety of different reasons. I've been fired. Did I regret it? Oh my God, how could they let me go? But, and in some organic period of time, I was onto something else. Did I get offered jobs? Yeah, I've been offered jobs. I guess if I had to distill it down, if I had to answer the question, I'd say I never stayed at a job for the paycheck. I've always stayed at jobs because I was getting something out of it that was feeding my soul and that I was learning from. That definitely happened for RAC. Only reason why I left RAC was because someone offered me a better job with more pay, and also Friends with Noise had gotten to a point where there was a real conflict of interest because they were a funder and we were going to be looking for funds, and I knew I could not stay there because I was already getting called into meetings. Hey Andre, we need to know more about Friends with Noise. We need to know more about BCC. If you're going to be involved in the arts, then we have to make sure that people don't think that you're getting special treatment because you're a part of RAC. So that made it easier to leave when I left. Like I said, getting higher paid and better title didn't hurt. But we're all trying to navigate and be the CEO of our own business. And sometimes it means taking a risk. Sometimes it means taking a real assessment. Sometimes it means reorganizing. Say, hey, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? I remember when I was in between jobs in New York City, being a tape hound and putting tapes in. I had a daughter. I wanted to be with her. And I saw this movie called What the Bleep Do You Know? Right? And one of the best things about this movie was acknowledging that we live within multiple dimensions. And we can pick the dimension that we want to live in through focused thought and focused energy. Now that can be prayer, that can be meditation, it can be whatever you want. But we can pick the reality that we want to live in. And I picked this reality. I picked this reality. And whether it was me getting on a game show on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I won enough money that paid for me to come back to New York. I could come back to Oregon. I got to go to Ghana and touch that soil at the same time period and feel reinvigorated and to feel like I did have control of my own destiny, and I just needed to see it and just really touch it and believe it. So it's hard to say when you should leave a job, but I think it's a lot easier to say when you need to believe in yourself and move forward with that intention.
I think we need a quick footnote here. Can you remind us what the format of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is?
Oh yeah, so basically it was, Who Wants to Be, I know, right, I'm dating myself, but basically it was a game show where you had to answer a multi-choice question, and every question, it multiplied your money. And
Was this, you had a life?
yeah, lifelines and all that. And unfortunately, yeah, it's that one. And so basically they really screwed me because the first day I went through and I answered all the questions, I was on fire, I was smooth. But then because of union rules, they stopped at 5 o'clock in the middle of my flow. So I had to come back the next day. So I was up all night, just, chewing my fingers and thinking, oh my God, what's gonna happen tomorrow? And the very next day, I washed up in the very first question.
What was the question?
Right, of course, how could I forget? Who co-wrote Blazing Saddles with Mel Brooks? And the choices were Gene Hackman, Richard Pryor, Rob Reiner, or Bob Newhart.
Rob Reiner.
I know it, but I'm not.
It was Richard Pryor.
Richard.
Oh, wow.
Richard Pryor. Right, Richard Pryor. Yeah, I thought, I think I picked.
You let the audience pick.
I did let the audience pick, and they picked. No. I did the 50-50, and it was down between Gene Wilder and Rob Reiner. And I think I picked Rob. I think I might have picked Wilder because he was in it. But yeah. So.